The empty echo. Harrison Reed stared at his reflection in the penthouse window, Manhattan's skyline glittering behind him like a jewelry box spilled open. At 36, he had amassed a fortune that placed him comfortably among the world's elite. His tech company, Quantumverse, had revolutionized virtual reality therapeutics, earning him magazine covers and endless invitations. Yet lately, something felt missing. Each charity gala, each yacht party, each carefully orchestrated dinner blended into the next. The faces around him changed, but the conversations remained identical. Flattery wrapped in ambition, all directed at what he could provide rather than who he was. "Mr. Reed, the car is waiting." His assistant Theodora's voice broke through his thoughts. "The Botanical Heritage Foundation Gala begins in 40 minutes. Harrison straightened his custom tom. "Ford tuxedo. Another night, another $1 million dinner," he murmured. "This one matters," Theodora reminded him, handing him his phone. "Your board wants Quantumverse associated with environmental causes. Good optics for the Asian market expansion." Even charity had become transactional. Harrison nodded, mentally preparing for another evening of meaningless conversations. The gala was held at the Metropolitan Museum's rooftop garden, transformed for the evening into an enchanted forest. Models dressed as mythical creatures wove through the crowd, while waiters offered champagne on silver trays. Harrison recognized tech moguls, fashion designers, and at least 3 celebrities whose names escaped him. "Harrison! Darling!" Vivian Westerly, a socialite whose father owned half of Manhattan's waterfront properties, glided toward him. Her dress, likely worth more than most people's annual salary, sparkled under the fairy lights. "I was hoping you'd be here." "Vivienne?" He greeted her with practiced charm. "Beautiful event, isn't it? Though between us I can't tell a rare plant from a common weed." She laughed too loudly. "I'm on the committee because Daddy insists on family representation. Speaking of representation, you simply must come to my birthday gala next month. I'm having it on Daddy's island." As she continued, Harrison's attention drifted. He'd heard variations of this conversation 1,000 times. His gaze wandered across the rooftop, past the clusters of wealth and influence, settling on a quiet corner where something unusual caught his eye. A woman knelt beside a display of small plants, adjusting something with focused attention. Unlike everyone else who seemed to be performing for an audience, she appeared completely absorbed in her task. Her simple emerald dress was elegant but understated, her dark hair pulled back in a practical knot. "Excuse me," Harrison said to Vivienne mid-sentence, drawn toward the corner before he realized he was moving. As he approached, he noticed the woman consulting a small notebook, making quick notes. The plants before her weren't the showy centerpieces decorating the rest of the gala, but small, almost unremarkable specimens in scientific-looking containers. "Are they misbehaving?" Harrison asked. The woman looked up, startled. Her eyes were a surprising amber color, intelligent and direct. "Pardon?" "The plants," he clarified. "You seem concerned about them." "Oh," she smiled slightly. "They're not misbehaving. They're surviving against odds, actually. These are the last known specimens of Hesperus matronalis variant goldeni. Most people would walk right past them, but they're critically endangered." Harrison was taken aback by her lack of recognition. Everyone knew who he was. "I'm Harrison Reed," he offered, waiting for the usual widening of eyes. "Penelope Walsh," she replied simply, extending a soil-smudged hand before seeming to realize, and quickly wiping it on a cloth from her pocket. "Most people call me Penny. I'm with the Northeast Botanical Research Institute." "You're not a typical gala attendee," he observed. "Neither are my plants," she said with a small laugh. "I'm here because these specimens need monitoring every 4 hours, and the Foundation wanted them displayed tonight. So here I am." She glanced at his perfect tuxedo. "You, however, Look exactly like you belong here." Before Harrison could respond, a commotion erupted near the main stage. The lighting system had malfunctioned, leaving the Foundation's director in darkness just as he prepared to begin his speech. "Excuse me," Penny said, already moving toward the problem. Harrison watched as she slipped behind the stage, spoke briefly to a technician, and within moments, the lights were restored. She then melted back into the crowd, returning to her plants without seeking acknowledgement. For the remainder of the evening, Harrison found himself unusually distracted. He made the expected rounds, shook the necessary hands, and pledged the appropriate sum when the donation card circulated. But his attention kept returning to the corner where Penny tended her endangered plants, oblivious to the wealth and power swirling around her. As the evening wound down, he found himself walking back to her display. "Will they make it?" he asked, nodding toward the plants. Penny looked up, seeming surprised he had returned. "With the right conditions and a lot of care, yes. That's the amazing thing about life. It finds a way even when overlooked." "What makes them worth saving?" The question came out more genuine than anything he'd said all night. "Everything has value, Mr. Reed," she said, carefully closing her notebook. "Even things most people never notice." For the first time in longer than he could remember, Harrison felt something stir within him. Curiosity. Not about acquisition or advantage, but about something he couldn't quantify. "I'd like to hear more about your work," he said, surprising himself. Penny studied him for a moment, as if assessing his sincerity. "Our research greenhouse is open to donors on Thursdays," she finally replied. "If you're genuinely interested." As Harrison left the gala that night, the emptiness that had accompanied him for months felt somehow different. The echo in his soul had been interrupted by something unexpected. A scientist with soil under her fingernails who cared more about endangered plants than impressing a billionaire. For the first time in years, Harrison Reed found himself looking forward to Thursday. Green fingers, golden heart. Thursday arrived with unusual anticipation for Harrison. He had instructed his driver to take him to the Northeast Botanical Research Institute, located on the outskirts of the city, a modest complex of greenhouses and laboratories nestled against a nature preserve. Harrison had made a substantial anonymous donation to the Botanical Heritage Foundation the morning after the gala, ensuring his welcome, though he wasn't sure why he'd kept his name off the donation. As his Bentley pulled into the gravel parking lot, he felt oddly out of place. The few other vehicles were practical models caked with mud and sporting bumper stickers about saving bees and planting native species. Harrison straightened his casual linen shirt, the most informal item in his wardrobe, yet still visibly expensive. The main greenhouse was a cathedral of glass and greenery, humid air enveloping him as he entered. Voices echoed from somewhere within the verdant maze, and Harrison followed them, passing trays of seedlings and experimental growing stations. He found Penny in a section marked Endangered Species Propagation, her hair twisted into a messy bun, wearing cargo pants and a faded t-shirt bearing the Institute's logo. She was demonstrating something to a group of school children, her hands animated as she spoke. "And this little fighter," she was saying, holding up a pot with what looked like an ordinary wildflower, "is one of only 57 known specimens left in the wild. Who can tell me why protecting biodiversity matters?" A small girl raised her hand. "Because all living things deserve to live?" Penny's face brightened. "That's a beautiful answer, Zoe. Absolutely right. And also because each plant plays a role in its ecosystem, like actors in a play. If too many actors disappear, eventually the whole play falls apart." Harrison hung back, watching as she patiently answered questions and let each child carefully water a plant. There was something captivating about her enthusiasm, so different from the calculated passion he encountered in his world. When the children departed, Penny finally noticed him. Surprise flickered across her face. "Mr. Reed, you actually came." "Harrison, please," he said, approaching. "And yes, I was intrigued by what you said about overlooked value." She studied him for a moment, as if trying to decipher his true intentions. "Well, you're dressed all wrong for a greenhouse tour," she finally said with a small smile. "But I suppose you can follow me anyway." For the next hour, Penny guided him through her world. She showed him propagation experiments, seed banks, and research stations where scientists studied plant compounds for medical applications. Her knowledge was expansive, her passion evident in every explanation. "This section is my personal project," she said eventually, leading him to a controlled environment room where the same small plants from the gala grew in carefully monitored conditions. "We're trying to establish a viable population for eventual reintroduction to protected habitats." "What happened to them in the wild?" Harrison asked, genuinely interested. "Development mostly. Their native wetland habitats were drained for commercial projects." There was no accusation in her voice, just sadness. "People rarely notice what's being lost until it's gone." Harrison felt an uncomfortable twinge. His own company had backed several large-scale development projects. And these matter because they're part of a complex web. These particular plants host a specific moth that pollinates certain trees that provide habitat for endangered birds. She looked up at him. "Everything is connected. Remove one element, and the effects ripple outward in ways we can't always predict." Harrison reached out to touch one delicate leaf. "Like a complex algorithm." "Exactly," Penny said, seeming pleased by his understanding. "Nature wrote the original code. We're just beginning to understand small parts of it." As they continued, through the greenhouse, Harrison found himself forgetting about emails, meetings, and market fluctuations. There was something meditative about this green sanctuary, something authentic that had long been missing from his curated existence. "So what made you choose endangered plants?" he asked, as they paused by a small pond nurturing aquatic species. "Not exactly the most glamorous field of study," Penny laughed. "Definitely not glamorous. My hands haven't been completely clean in years." She thought for a moment. "I grew up in rural Vermont. My grandmother had this incredible garden. Not fancy, just wildly diverse. She knew the name and purpose of every plant, even the ones most people called weeds." Her face softened with the memory. "When she died, a developer bought her land. I came home from college to find bulldozers where her garden had been. That's when I realized beauty and value aren't always obvious. Sometimes the most precious things are overlooked because they don't announce themselves loudly enough." Harrison felt something shift inside him. In Penny's world, worth wasn't determined by market value or status. It was intrinsic, requiring no validation beyond existence itself. "What about you?" she asked unexpectedly. "Why technology? Why virtual reality?" The question caught him off guard. People rarely asked about his motivations, only his methods or results. "I wanted to create worlds," he said after a moment. "Places where people could experience things beyond their reach." "Like nature?" Penny suggested with gentle irony. Harrison chuckled. "Point taken. Though our neural therapy programs actually do include natural settings, they've proven effective for patients with PTSD and chronic anxiety." "That's actually beautiful," Penny admitted. "Using technology to reconnect people with healing environments." Their conversation flowed more easily after that, finding unexpected parallels between their seemingly opposite worlds. As they reached the administrative building, a harried-looking man in his 50s burst through the door. "Penny, there you are. The funding committee just called. It's not good news." She tensed immediately. "What happened, Garrett?" "Westerly Development is pushing forward with the Millstone Creek project. The conservation easement application was denied. If they break ground next month as planned, The last natural habitat of your Hesperus variant will be gone. Harrison froze at the familiar name. Westerly Development. Vivian's father's company. A company Quantum Verse had recently invested. In Penny's face had gone pale, but her voice remained steady. We'll find another way. We always do. Garrett nodded grimly before noticing Harrison. His eyes widened in recognition. Mr. Reed, I didn't realize you were visiting today. I'm Garrett Fleming, Institute Director. Your donation was extremely generous. Penny turned to Harrison, surprise evident. That was you? A small contribution, Harrison said, suddenly uncomfortable. Small? Garrett laughed incredulously. It's funding our entire seed bank expansion. The warmth in Penny's eyes had been replaced by something guarded. Quite a coincidence that you're invested in our work, she said carefully, considering your company's partnership with Westerly Development. Harrison felt the gulf between their worlds suddenly widen. I oversee hundreds of investments. I wasn't aware of the specifics of the Millstone Creek project. Of course not, Penny said, her voice neutral but her meaning clear. Few people look closely at what's being destroyed when there's profit to be made. The vibration of Harrison's phone broke the tension. His assistant was calling, probably about the board meeting he was now late for. I should go, he said, declining the call. Thank you for the tour. It was illuminating. Penny nodded, professional once more. Thank you for your interest, Mr. Reed. As Harrison walked back to his waiting car, the greenhouse's humid warmth still clinging to his skin, he felt the emptiness returning, but now it was accompanied by something else. Awareness. Like seeing a color that had always been present but never noticed before. In his world of acquisition and expansion, what had he been overlooking? What value had he failed to recognize? And why did the disappointment in Penny's amber eyes bother him more than any board member's disapproval ever had? Back in his office tower, surrounded by glass and steel and spectacular views, Harrison found himself researching the Millstone Creek development project long into the night, seeing it through new eyes that had glimpsed, however briefly, the value of invisible things. Roots and wings. 3 days had passed since Harrison's visit to the Research Institute, and he couldn't shake the memory of Penny's face when she learned about his connection to Westerly Development. He had spent those days digging through documents, making calls and learning everything he could about the Millstone Creek project. What he discovered left him increasingly uncomfortable. The development, a luxury retail and residential complex, had been fast-tracked through environmental reviews. Several impact studies had been overlooked or minimized. Harrison had found himself staring at blueprints late into the night, seeing not the projected profit margins, but instead the invisible cost, a delicate ecosystem erased for another high-end shopping experience. You wanted to see me? Vincent Price, Harrison's CFO, appeared in his office doorway, looking puzzled by the stacks of environmental reports covering the usually immaculate desk. I want to divest from the Westerly Millstone Creek project, Harrison said, without preamble. Vincent blinked. That's unexpected. Our projected ROI is substantial and construction begins in 3 weeks. Walter Westerly won't take this well. I'm aware. Harrison pushed forward a folder. I've outlined an alternative investment strategy. We redirect our funding toward their Hudson Valley project instead. It's repurposing existing structures, minimal environmental impact. Vincent skimmed the documents, frowning. This is about that botanist, isn't it? Theodora mentioned you visited some research greenhouse. His tone suggested he found the whole thing puzzling. Harrison, we've backed dozens of development projects. Why the sudden environmental conscience? Harrison considered the question. Perhaps it's overdue, he finally said. Make the arrangements, Vincent. After his CFO left, Harrison picked up his phone and scrolled to the number he'd obtained from the Institute's website. He hesitated before pressing call. Northeast Botanical Research Institute, this is Penny. It's Harrison Reed, he said, suddenly uncertain. I was wondering if you might have time for coffee. A pause. Why? Her directness was refreshing after years of people who never questioned his requests. I'd like to discuss Millstone Creek. Another longer pause. There's a place called Earthbound near the Institute, tomorrow at 10. She hung up without waiting for confirmation. The following morning, Harrison arrived at Earthbound, a rustic cafe filled with plants and mismatched furniture, to find Penny already seated in a corner, wearing a practical sweater over jeans, her hair loose around her shoulders. She looked up from her notebook as he approached. You're punctual, she observed, closing her notes. I appreciate that. Harrison sat across from her. The cafe was unlike his usual sleek meeting spots. Everything here seemed handmade or repurposed. Thank you for agreeing to meet. A server approached, a young man with dreadlocks and a warm smile. The usual, Penny? Thanks, Nico, and whatever my guest would like. Harrison glanced at the chalkboard menu. Just black coffee, please. When Nico left, Penny leaned forward. So, Millstone Creek. Are you here to explain why your investment in concrete and steel matters more than one of the last intact wetland ecosystems in the county? Actually, I'm here to tell you that Quantumverse is withdrawing financial support from the project. Her eyes widened, suspicion giving way to cautious hope. Why? I reviewed the environmental impact data. The true cost outweighs the benefit. And Walter Westerly agreed to this? Harrison's mouth quirked. Not exactly. He called me several colorful names, but our investment was significant enough that its withdrawal creates complications. It won't stop the project entirely, but it buys time, perhaps enough for a new conservation proposal. Penny studied him with those perceptive amber eyes. That was unexpected. I'm capable of learning, Harrison said simply. Their drinks arrived, his, plain black coffee, and her something that appeared to contain more plants than liquid. The momentary interruption eased the intensity between them. May I ask what you're working on? Harrison nodded toward her notebook. Some of her guardedness fell away as she opened it to reveal sketches of a greenhouse design. A propagation facility specifically for endangered wetland species. Just a dream project, really. We don't have the funding. Harrison examined the drawing with genuine interest. The solar orientation is innovative. You know about passive solar design? I've invested in sustainable architecture. The principles translate across applications. He pointed to her sketch. Have you considered geothermal for climate control? It would reduce operating costs significantly. Surprise flickered across her face. I hadn't gotten that far in the practical details. Their conversation shifted into unexpected territory: design efficiency, sustainability metrics, the integration of technology with natural systems. Harrison found himself engaged in a way board meetings never managed to achieve. Penny's practical knowledge complemented his broader understanding of emerging technologies, creating a dialogue that left them both leaning forward, coffee growing cold. You're not what I expected, Penny admitted after nearly an hour had passed. Neither are you, Harrison replied. Most people in my world are calculating what they can gain from every interaction. And I'm not. You calculate what your plants can gain, he said with a smile. There's a difference. Something shifted between them, a recognition of genuine connection despite their different worlds. As they finally rose to leave, Harrison made a decision. I'm hosting a benefit dinner next week for tech leaders and potential investors. Would you consider attending and speaking about your research? It might create funding opportunities for your greenhouse project. Penny hesitated. I'm not exactly comfortable in gala settings. It would be small, 20 people maximum. And I'd be grateful for a friendly face among the usual suspects. Her lips curved slightly. Is the mighty Harrison Reed admitting he gets bored at his own parties? Terminally, he confessed, and they both laughed. All right, she agreed, but don't expect me in designer evening wear. I would be disappointed if you appeared in anything. But exactly what you choose to wear, Harrison said, surprising himself with his sincerity. The evening of the benefit arrived, and Harrison found himself watching the door more anxiously than usual. When Penny finally entered, he felt an unexpected warmth spread through him. She wore a simple dress in deep forest green, her only adornment a pendant that appeared to contain a small pressed flower. You came, he said, moving to greet her. I said I would. She glanced around the penthouse with its spectacular views, though I feel rather like a specimen outside its natural habitat. Before Harrison could respond, Vivian Westerly appeared at his elbow, diamonds glittering at her throat. Harrison, darling, Daddy is still absolutely furious with you, but I told him you must have your reasons. Her gaze slid to Penny, assessing and dismissive in a single glance. And who is your friend? Dr. Penelope Walsh, Harrison said, firmly. One of our speakers this evening. Penny, this is Vivian Westerly. Westerly, Penny repeated, recognition flashing in her eyes. Of Westerly Development. Guilty, Vivian laughed airily. Though I leave all that boring business to Daddy. I'm just here for the champagne and to remind Harrison that he still owes me a proper explanation for his investment betrayal. She linked her arm through Harrison's possessively. Penny took a step back. I should prepare for my presentation. As she walked away, Vivian raised a perfectly sculpted eyebrow. Really, Harrison? A botanist? Is this some kind of midlife crisis? For the first time, Harrison saw Vivian clearly, the calculated charm, the assumption of privilege. Excuse me, he said, disengaging himself. I need to check on the presentation setup. He found Penny standing by the floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out at the city lights. I apologize for Vivian, he said quietly. No need. I'm under no illusions about belonging in this world. She turned to face him. Why did you really invite me here, Harrison? As some kind of statement to your investors? Or am I a novelty, the simple girl who cares about plants rather than profit margins? The question struck uncomfortably close to truths Harrison hadn't fully examined. Neither, he said after a moment. I invited you because when I'm with you, the world makes more sense. You see value where others see nothing worth noticing. Penny's expression softened. That might be the most honest thing I've heard at a gathering like this. Throughout the evening, Harrison watched as Penny captivated his guests with her quiet passion. She spoke not of abstract environmental ideals, but of specific, tangible connections, medicinal compounds derived from endangered plants, ecosystem, services that supported human communities, the irreplaceable genetic library that each species represented. To his surprise, several investors approached her afterward. Business cards extended, genuine interest kindled. Harrison felt an unfamiliar pride that had nothing to do with his own accomplishments. As the evening wound down, he found Penny on his terrace gazing at the stars barely visible through the city's light pollution. Your friends are more receptive than I expected, she admitted, especially that venture capitalist, Ren Hasegawa. He seemed genuinely interested in biophilic design applications. Ren sees value in innovation, Harrison said, joining her at the railing, and you're nothing if not innovative. A comfortable silence fell between them. Harrison was acutely aware of how rare such moments had become in his life. Times when nothing was demanded or expected, when connection existed for its own sake. Thank you, Penny said finally. Not just for tonight, but for reconsidering Millstone Creek. It matters. I'm beginning to understand how much, Harrison replied. As they stood side by side, the city spread before them like a constellation of human ambition. Harrison felt something taking root inside him, something that had nothing to do with acquisition or achievement. For the first time in years, he felt the quiet thrill of possibility, not of what he could gain, but of who he might become in the light of another's belief in what was truly valuable. The evening had changed something fundamental between them. Whatever grew from this moment would have both roots and wings, grounded in authenticity while reaching towards something neither had fully imagined yet. The Garden of Truths. 3 weeks after the benefit dinner, Harrison sat in the sleek conference room at Quantumverse headquarters, only half listening as his executive team presented quarterly projections. His thoughts kept drifting to the greenhouse designs spread across his desk at home, collaborative sketches he and Penny had developed during increasingly frequent meetings that blurred the line between professional consultation and personal connection. And finally, said Imani Davis, his chief strategy officer, we need to address the Westerly situation. Walter is making noise about your withdrawal being a breach of good faith. He's suggesting to other potential partners that Quantumverse is becoming unpredictable. Harrison refocused on the meeting. Has our reputation suffered tangibly? Not yet, Imani admitted. But there's another complication. Julian Wade is requesting a private meeting with you. A murmur ran through the room. Julian Wade was Harrison's oldest friend and business partner, brilliant but intensely private, overseeing Quantumverse's international development while Harrison managed domestic operations. They spoke weekly, but Julian rarely involved himself in investment disputes. Did he say why? Harrison asked. Only that it concerns Westerly development and several other projects. He's flying in tomorrow. After the meeting adjourned, Harrison found himself calling Penny. Their relationship had evolved into something undefined but significant, conversations that ranged from philosophical to practical, a growing ease in each other's company. Can you meet tonight? He asked when she answered. There's something I'd like to discuss. They agreed to meet at Earthbound, which had become their unofficial neutral territory. When Harrison arrived, Penny was already waiting, a collection of soil samples spread across the table. Sorry for the mess, she said, gathering her work. We're analyzing contamination patterns in urban gardens. Harrison smiled at her practical enthusiasm. Leave it. I like seeing your process. As Nico brought their usual drinks, Harrison noticed how comfortable he'd become in this eclectic space, how Penny's world had begun to feel more authentic than the luxury he had surrounded himself with for years. So, what's on your mind? Penny asked. You sounded concerned on the phone. Harrison explained the situation with Walter Westerly and Julian's unexpected involvement. I can't shake the feeling that something larger is happening. Julian doesn't involve himself in routine investment disputes. Penny considered this. Could there be connections to other projects? Environmental complications that haven't been disclosed? Possibly. Harrison hesitated. There's something else I wanted to discuss. The investors from the benefit dinner. Several have expressed interest in funding your propagation facility, particularly Ren Hasegawa. He sees commercial applications for your research. Penny's eyes widened. That's incredible, but also complicated. The Institute operates on grant funding and donations. Commercial partnerships would require careful, ethical boundaries. I understand, Harrison said, but it could secure your work for years to come. And I've been thinking, my foundation could provide matching funds, structured as no-strings scientific grants. She studied him with those perceptive eyes. Why are you doing this, Harrison? Really? The question hung between them, demanding honesty. Because I believe in your work, he began, then stopped himself. No, that's true, but it's not complete. I'm doing this because you've shown me that I've been measuring value all wrong. Because when I'm with you, I remember why I started building things in the first place. Not for profit, but for purpose. Something softened in her expression. That might be the most honest thing you've ever said to me. I'm trying to deserve your good opinion, he admitted. Their hands were close on the table, nearly touching. The moment stretched between them, full of unspoken possibility. I should go, Penny said finally, though she made no move to leave. Early fieldwork tomorrow. I'll walk you out, Harrison offered. Outside, the evening air was cool and clear. They paused on the sidewalk, suddenly awkward despite hours of easy conversation. Penny, Harrison began, then stopped as she reached up and gently straightened his collar. Your world is still very different from mine, she said softly. I'm not sure how they fit together. Maybe they don't have to fit perfectly, he suggested. Maybe they can grow into something new. Her smile was worth every uncomfortable board meeting, every questioning glance from his executive team. Good night, Harrison. Good night, Penny. Harrison watched her walk toward the subway entrance, feeling both lighter and more grounded than he had in years. The next morning, Julian Wade waited in Harrison's office, tall, sharp-featured, with the intensity that had driven their partnership since college. After brief greetings, Julian closed the door. We have a problem, he said without preamble, a pattern I've only recently recognized. He opened his laptop, displaying a map with highlighted locations. These are all development projects we've invested in over the past 3 years. Most through subsidiaries or partner firms like Westerly. Harrison studied the map. What am I looking at? Environmental manipulation, Julian said flatly. Each of these projects had environmental concerns. Each moved forward after key studies were altered or regulators were influenced. Influenced how? Harrison felt a chill. Money, primarily. Sometimes pressure. I discovered it while reviewing. The Millstone Creek withdrawal. Your sudden environmental concern prompted me to look deeper. Julian's expression was unreadable. The pattern is consistent and concerning. Harrison's mind raced. Are you saying we've been complicit in nothing illegal? Julian interjected. Merely expedient. Business as usual for development projects. I've never questioned it. Until now, Harrison noted. Julian's gaze was direct. Until you did. This botanist you've been seeing, she's changing your perspective. It wasn't a question, but Harrison answered anyway. She's helping me see things I've been overlooking, like the fact that our company might be enabling environmental damage on a significant scale. Julian's tone remained neutral. Harrison studied his oldest friend. Why are you bringing this to me now? Because decisions need to be made. Julian stood, pacing the office. Walter Westerly called me personally about your withdrawal. He seemed to think I could talk sense into you. In the process, he revealed more than he intended about how regulatory approvals are being obtained. And I found myself unexpectedly troubled by it. Julian's admission seemed to surprise, even himself. We built Quantumverse to create, Harrison, not to destroy. Somewhere along the way, I think we lost sight of that. Relief washed through Harrison. So you support withdrawing from Millstone Creek? I do. But it goes further than one project. We need a comprehensive review of all our development investments, and we need to decide what kind of company we want to be moving forward. The conversation shifted into territory neither had explored in years. Foundational values, long-term legacy, the responsibility that came with their influence. By the time Julian left, they had outlined a bold new approach that would reshape Quantumverse's investment strategy. That evening, Harrison drove to the Research Institute, finding Penny in her greenhouse office, surrounded by data charts and plant samples. Harrison? She looked up in surprise. I didn't expect you today. Without preamble, he laid out everything Julian had discovered. the pattern of environmental compromises, the decision to conduct a comprehensive review, the commitment to redefine their investment principles. Penny listened without interruption, her expression shifting from surprise to concern to cautious hope. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "That can't have been an easy conversation with your partner," she finally said. Surprisingly, it was. "Julian and I started Quantum Verse with ideals we've gradually compromised. This feels like remembering who we meant to be." Penny stood, moving, to stand before him. "And who is that exactly?" "People who build things that matter," Harrison said simply. "People who consider the full impact of their choices." "That's a fundamental shift for a company your size," she observed. "Yes, and it won't happen overnight. There will be resistance, financial implications, complicated transitions." Harrison took a deep breath. "But I've never been more certain of anything." Penny studied him with those perceptive eyes that had seen through his carefully constructed facade from the beginning. "This isn't just about Millstone Creek anymore, is it?" "No," Harrison admitted. "It's about seeing clearly, about recognizing value that can't be quantified on balance sheets." He hesitated, then added, "It's about the kind of person I want to be, the kind of person I hope might be worthy of someone who has always seen the world more clearly than I have." Understanding dawned in her expression. She reached out, her fingers brushing his. "This greenhouse closes in 20 minutes, she said softly. "Perhaps after that we could get dinner? Somewhere with neither boardrooms nor soil samples?" Harrison felt something bloom inside him, something that had been taking root since that first encounter at the gala. "I'd like that very much." As they stood amid the endangered plants Penny had dedicated her life to protecting, Harrison realized that he had found something more precious than all his acquisitions, a truth he had overlooked while pursuing wealth and influence. True value couldn't be purchased or possessed. It grew organically in the spaces between purpose and connection, in the gardens of truth that flourished when one finally learned to see the invisible things that mattered most. That evening, over, dinner at a small neighborhood restaurant where no one recognized the billionaire tech mogul, Harrison and Penny began to envision how their different worlds might intertwine, creating something neither could have cultivated alone. Blossoming. Beyond borders 1 year later, Harrison stood at the edge of what had once been the contested Millstone Creek property, watching as Penny directed a team of researchers and volunteers in planting native species along the restored wetland. The land that had nearly become a luxury development was now the Quantum Conservation Initiative's flagship project, a combined research facility and public nature preserve. "Mr. Reed," called Jasmine, a 12-year-old from the local middle school's science program. "We found another Hesperus seedling. Dr. Walsh says it's self-seeded from the specimens we planted in spring." Harrison smiled, making his way carefully along the boardwalk that protected the delicate ecosystem beneath. "That's excellent news, Jasmine. Nature reclaiming its space." The journey to this moment had been anything but smooth. Walter Westerly had fought the land's redesignation with every legal maneuver at his disposal. The business press had questioned Harrison's sanity when Quantum Verse announced its comprehensive sustainability pivot. Shareholders had threatened revolts that only Julian's steadfast partnership had helped navigate. Yet, here they were. The wetland thrived, the research facility operated at capacity, and Quantum Verse's new direction had attracted a different kind of investor, those looking for long-term sustainability rather than quick returns. Harrison reached Penny, who was kneeling beside a monitoring station, her hands muddy as always, her face alight with the joy of measurable progress. "The water quality readings are the best we've seen," she told him, standing to brush a quick kiss against his cheek. "The filtration system is working exactly as the models predicted." Their relationship had evolved alongside their professional collaboration, cautiously at first, then with increasing certainty. They had built something neither had imagined possible, a bridge between their worlds that enhanced rather than diminished each. "Julian just called," Harrison said. "The board approved the expansion budget. We can move forward with the additional research bays and the educational center." Penny's eyes widened. "Already? I thought that was scheduled for next quarter's review." The preliminary results from the medicinal compound study accelerated things. Ren Hasegawa's team identified 2 potential applications that show significant promise. Harrison smiled. "It turns out, saving endangered plants can be good business, when approached properly." They walked together along the boardwalk, greeted by researchers and community volunteers who had become part of this unlikely community. The afternoon sun filtered through the willow trees they had planted in the first month, already providing shade and soil stabilization. "Sometimes I still can't believe this is real," Penny admitted, gesturing to the thriving ecosystem that had been saved from bulldozers. "That night at the gala when you first spoke to me, if someone had told me we'd end up here..." "You'd have had them tested for hallucinogenic plant exposure," Harrison suggested with a smile. She laughed, the sound as natural in this setting as the birdsong overhead. "Something like that." They reached the observation deck that overlooked the entire preserve. Below them, graduate students collected data while a group of elementary schoolers received a lesson on wetland ecology. Near the research building, Julian was deep in conversation with Dr. Garrett Fleming about the upcoming International Conservation Technology Summit they were co-hosting. "You've changed," Penny said suddenly, studying Harrison's face. "Not just your priorities or your business, something deeper." Harrison considered this. "I've learned to see differently," he said finally. "To recognize that true wealth isn't what you acquire, but what you nurture." "That sounds suspiciously like something a botanist would say," she teased. "I've been influenced by good company." He took her hand, soil-smudged fingers entwining with his. "Though I seem to recall someone telling me that everything has value, even things most people never notice." "I had no idea you were actually listening," Penny said softly. "Neither did I." Harrison gestured toward the vibrant landscape before them. "But it might be the most important thing I've ever heard." As the afternoon light turned golden, they made their way to the small cottage they shared at the edge of the preserve, a compromise between Harrison's former luxury and Penny's practicality. Simple but beautiful, with floor-to-ceiling windows that blurred the boundary between inside and outside, it represented the new life they had cultivated together. On the porch waited Jasper, the 3-legged rescue dog they had adopted from the local shelter, alongside a stack of scientific journals and the latest prototype of quantum versus biodegradable soil monitoring sensors. "Home," Harrison said with quiet certainty. Later that evening, as twilight settled over the preserve, they hosted a dinner for the core team that had made the initiative possible. Julian and his wife, Sophia, Garrett and his husband, Thomas, Imani, Davis and her daughter, Zara, and Ren Hasegawa gathered around the large reclaimed wood table on the cottage's screened porch. "A toast," Julian proposed, raising his glass, "to 1 year of the Quantum Conservation Initiative and to the unlikely partnership that made it possible. To seeing value in overlooked places," Imani added with a meaningful glance at Harrison and Penny. As conversation flowed around the table, ideas for expansion, new research directions, community engagement strategies, Harrison observed the gathering with quiet amazement. These people from disparate worlds had formed a community of purpose, crossing boundaries that once seemed impermeable. After dinner, as their guests departed and night settled fully over the preserve, Harrison and Penny stood on the porch, listening to the chorus of frogs and insects that signaled a healthy ecosystem. "I have something for you," Harrison said, reaching into his pocket. "A small token of our first year. He handed her a small box, which she opened to reveal a pendant, a delicate silver frame surrounding what appeared to be a preserved specimen of Hesperus matronalis, variant goldeni, the endangered flower that had first connected them. "Harrison," she breathed. "Is this—" "From our first successful propagation," he confirmed, "preserved in biocompatible resin. The research team helped me create it." Penny's eyes glistened as she fastened it around her neck. "It's perfect." "There's more," Harrison said. "Look closer." She held the pendant under the porch light, noticing for the first time the tiny engraving on the silver frame. "Everything has value, even things most people never notice." "My grandmother's wisdom," she said softly, "preserved alongside her beloved plants." "The beginning of everything important," Harrison agreed. They stood together in comfortable silence, the sounds of the preserve enveloping them. Harrison reflected on the transformation of the past year, not just of the land they had saved, but of himself. The billionaire who had once measured worth in acquisitions and influence had discovered a different kind of abundance in the most unexpected place, a quiet corner of a gala where a woman knelt beside overlooked plants, seeing value where others saw nothing. "What are you thinking?" Penny asked, leaning against him. "That I spent years building virtual worlds when the real one contained wonders I hadn't bothered to notice," Harrison said. "And that it took someone with soil under her fingernails to show me what truly matters." Penny smiled. "And what truly matters, Harrison Reed?" He considered the question that had once seemed so complicated but now felt simple. "Connection, purpose, growth, seeing the value in things and people that the world overlooks." "Not bad for a tech billionaire," she teased gently. "I had an excellent teacher." As moonlight filtered through the trees, casting dappled shadows across the porch, Harrison recognized that his journey from emptiness to fulfillment had begun with a single moment of genuine curiosity, a billionaire pausing to ask about unremarkable plants, a botanist willing to answer with unvarnished truth. Their worlds hadn't merged so much as expanded to include each other, creating something richer than either had possessed alone. The luxury and influence of Harrison's former life now served a deeper purpose, while Penny's vision and expertise had found the resources to flourish beyond what she had thought possible. "Do you ever miss it?" Penny asked suddenly. "The penthouse, the galas being at the center of that world?" Harrison considered the question honestly. "Sometimes I miss the simplicity of measuring success in numbers," he admitted. "But no, I don't miss the emptiness that came with it." He drew her closer, both of them gazing out at the darkened landscape that teemed with life invisible to casual observation. "What we've built here, what we're continuing to build, matters in ways my former success never did." "And the gossip columns calling you the billionaire who traded glamour for gardening?" she asked with a smile. Harrison laughed. "They've never understood the difference between price and value." As they stood together on the threshold between the home they had created and the wilderness they had saved, Harrison Reed, once surrounded by luxury and glamour, realized he had found something infinitely more precious in the company of a woman who had taught him to see beyond surface appearances. In choosing Penny, the quiet botanist no one had noticed, he hadn't given up wealth at all. He had simply learned to recognize it in its most authentic form. A life rich with purpose, connection, and the courage to nurture what truly matters, whether or not the world recognized its worth. And in that understanding, both the billionaire and the botanist had found something neither had sought but both had needed, a love that, like the rarest of plants, thrived not in shallow soil, but in the deep, complex ecosystem of genuine understanding. Together, they had created something that would continue growing long after they were gone, roots extending into the earth, branches reaching toward the sky, blossoming beyond all borders.